Hello and welcome to the Streaming Parson Podcast. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these, just because, I don't know, I just got caught up doing some things, and other weeks I just didn't actually have anything to actually talk about. But today, we're going to do something. I have done this before. It's been a while since I've done it, and that's where we're just going to do a little bit of case studies on like various forms of media. And that's where we get to today's topic. That is the point. And so today's objective is we're going to do a short case study on 3 different controversies that have sprung up on the internet. One of them is actually recent, which is what actually inspired this whole thing for me to do this topic. And of course, the other 2, one of them is actually bringing up an old one that I've done almost a year ago. And another one is an older, way older controversy that was around like a couple of years ago. But, of course, you're probably wondering, well, what the heck? Like, why would you bring up, like, digging up the past with these old controversies? But I kind of just want to re-look at these because it's not like these things don't resurface from time to time. They obviously just take different form. But, of course, the controversies I will be doing the case study on, I've read into them quite a bit more, and secondly, there are things that shameless self-promotion, but they're things related to things on this channel. So, with that said, today's topic is that is the point, and I'm going to address 3 controversies. First, I'm going to do the controversy that actually inspired this video, and for me to talk about this subject matter. Okay, hopefully that won't be too much of a nuisance. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Giselle Jewel controversy that has come up. Of course, I finally got caught up on my Bleach because everybody's been telling me to get back into it. So I was like, you know, this is part of the whole like Anime Rev thing where like and people at Anime Rev were telling me to get back into it. And so one of those things about like meeting new people, they get you to rewatch old shows and old franchises that you kind of lost interest in. But I came back to watch Bleach, and part is because they actually got around to this arc in the manga. In the manga, this arc was issue 270-ish to like 310. About 40 manga issues. And that's the Giselle Jewel villain arc. So Giselle Jewel was actually a minor character even before he came to prominence and power, or they came to prominence and power. And this is where the controversy begins. So, just a little introduction of who Giselle Jewel is. So Giselle Jewel is a character in Bleach 1000-Year Blood War. And the whole thing about Giselle is that Giselle is like the basically criminal mastermind behind like this kind of series of attacks that happen throughout the Bleach series. He's kind of the criminal mastermind. And the reason why he's able to pull this off is because he has his ability. Giselle's ability is that basically you come in contact with his blood, he can basically mind control you. That's kind of his whole shtick. And so how he does this normally is that he dresses up, he cross-dresses. He dresses up as a woman, and as you can see in this picture here, Giselle, who is biologically a man, has a very feminine appearance. And that's because what Giselle does is Giselle makes himself look like he's weak and defenseless, like a little girl kind of thing. And then of course, if Giselle gets close enough to you, he can infect you, and then you basically become like a mind slave to him. And then like one of the funny things too is that like in the in the anime, and there was a whole a controversy I heard about it when the anime was airing, was they edited out one of the lines in the anime, because apparently the Japanese kept an original line in the manga, but then when it got translated to American audiences, they kind of edited this part out. And it's when I think it's Yumachika. Yumachika's the one who has to investigate the outbreaks at first, these violent riots and whatever. And then encounters Giselle. And then Giselle, like, tries to lull Yumachika. And then Yumachika's just like, no, you can't trick me. I know you're not a defenseless little girl. I know what you are. And then in the original manga, he says his line. Yumachika says his line where it's like, "You reek of semen." It's such a brilliant line, and the idea is that, like, Giselle, pointing out that Giselle is basically a dude. But of course, the controversies come in where, like, oh, is how what Giselle's gender is. Is Giselle actually a male? Is Giselle female? What is up with that? Now, in the original Japanese, the idea was that Giselle was a man who cross-dresses. But as Giselle got brought to the West, that got muddied. It wasn't so much like simply Giselle was a man cross-dressing. And of course, the controversy on the right is the whole, like, oh, cross-dressing villains, why does that have to try and, like, glorify, which is weird that you just say, like, a villain is glorifying cross-dressing. That's kind of stupid rhetoric, which is why no one ever pays attention to the rights arguments in these controversies, because they usually come with stupid statements anyways. But something to think about with Giselle is, how does Giselle function within Thousand-Year Blood War? And if you actually think about this, and this is one of those things where, like, this article about Giselle, by the way, came out, I think, like, a couple weeks ago. I think it's like, it says here on the 12th of September. So that was only like 3 weeks ago. I know it's already the end of September, but like, when the episode 9 of the anime season came out, people were, like, on this topic. And I know that it's easy to, like, oh, why are you talking about it now then, if, like, the controversy, it's still going on. Like, this one is still kind of relevant. The other two controversies I'll talk about, they're not that relevant anymore. Well, one of them might very well spike back up, but they're not that relevant anymore. But they do, like, show that they rear their ugly heads here and there. But I just want to do, like, and of course, like, this is going off memory now, because it's been I skimmed over the manga chapters to get an idea of Giselle, but I haven't, like, read it in a lot of detail. I haven't dissected those chapters, if you will, to get a much deeper look. But you don't need to look that deep when it comes to Giselle, which is hilariously ironic, right? Because the whole idea is that, like, Giselle's whole character shtick is that Giselle is all about the distraction, and then the real villain lurks behind to, like, tag not just the characters that Giselle's trying to, like, defeat, but also, you, the audience. And this is where I actually like Giselle as a villain. Because one of the funny things too is that, like, what makes Giselle a very chilling villain is that Giselle is very realistic compared to a lot of other villains. I mean, this is Bleach we're talking about, so how realistic can villains get? But the thing that makes Giselle so chilling is that Giselle... Well, there's a couple things. The first thing is that Giselle doesn't show, like, villain dominance simply through, what's the term I'm thinking of power scaling, or upping the ante. So traditionally in most animes, stories even, like comics and whatever, the idea is that every time you introduce a new villain, you have to do the whole power scaling thing So basically how the power scaling thing works is if you have like the last villain could be like a certain strength level. The new villain shows up and easily does something that the last villain did. So the quintessential example of this is like Dragon Ball and their power levels. So when Dragon Ball Z is the better example. Because Dragon Ball Z is super guilty of this. So Dragon Ball Z comes around, and then you get like Vegeta as like the first major villain. Yeah, Raditz was a thing, but nobody cares about him, right? So Vegeta was a thing. And the thing that Dragon Ball did to show like Vegeta was like, you know, one hell of a threat was that Vegeta blows up a planet. This was in the anime filler. He blows up a planet. Vegeta and Nappa land on this like bug planet, and then after they're done messing around, Vegeta blows up the whole planet because he's a bad guy, so that's what he does. He blows up the planet, and that's supposed to show the audience like, damn, like this Vegeta guy, like how's Goku gonna beat him? I mean, Goku was barely able to fight Raditz, and then like Vegeta's this badass who can just blow up a planet. So after Goku beats Vegeta, you get to the next major villain, which is Frieza. And Frieza's like, blowing up planets is like casual to me. And then of course, Frieza's whole thing is like, it's so casual, I'm the one who blew up your home planet. Because I'm just that mustache twirlingly evil. And then when you get to the next villains, it's like, Cell can like just, he makes a claim that like, well, I'm created from like the strongest beings in the universe. I can easily blow up planets. And then there's a little bit where like, before the Cell tournament, when Cell's like in his perfect form, he's just chilling out because he gave the Z fighters 10 days. He's just like, I'm gonna go for a morning workout, and then he goes out to outer space and just blows up an asteroid with like one hit. And so it's the way of like power scaling, showing each new villain being like super badass because they're so powerful. And this is something that's typically like, every anime, every comic book is guilty of doing this. And the problem with power scaling is like, how high does the ante go? Right? But a clever writing will sometimes throw in a villain that doesn't rely on that to show how threatening they are. And so Giselle, how Giselle does it is that Giselle doesn't have like mountain crushing abilities like a lot of people, a lot of the villains in Bleach do. Especially when you get to issue 270. The previous villain before Giselle, like that guy was like leveling towns, and then Giselle shows up and he doesn't do any of that. But instead, what makes Giselle work as a villain is that Giselle is untouchable. Because not only does Giselle have his power, that if you actually make him bleed, he can basically mind control you. But of course, what you actually learn, which is actually kind of scary, is that 3/4 of the time, Giselle doesn't even need his special powers to control people. What you learn is that Giselle is a master manipulator. And so, Giselle has like 6 bodyguards that protect him, which are all women, by the way. And this, of course, like, Japan has no problem kind of playing at this idea, but like if you wrote this in like to a Western audience, they'd be like, oh, it's so bad, you know, like men are evil kind of thing, which that's the point. That's the point of Giselle's character, is to exemplify that idea that like, yes, there are men out there that are that evil. And manipulating, if a man manipulating, wow, let's try that again. If a man manipulating women is like a cardinal sin, then yeah, like it just exemplifies how evil Giselle is. Because one of the things that's really freaky about him, and why I think he's actually like pretty awesome as a villain, is that on a subconscious level, Giselle lives out like a very real male fantasy, that the ability to just manipulate women and have what he wants, and have his way with them. Because of course in the manga, they imply some pretty like dark things that like he does with his with some of the women under his employ, let's call it that. But you know, they like they serve him as servants, but they're more like just straight up slaves. But the thing that makes Giselle so chilling is that, like, yeah, he just like casually manipulates these women to like devote their lives to him, like basically a cult. And he's able to do that without his special powers. And then of course his special powers, the reason why he what his objective in the story arc, by the way, is to the reason why he's causing all these like attacks and riots is to draw out various like powerful fighters, and then he wants to use his power on them so he can mind control them, and then he would basically control the world by controlling all the strongest fighters on it, and then he would have a true elite guard and be uncontested. Because the other thing that actually shows how powerful he is that his mind control power is basically permanent. So even if you like shake out of it for a while, since you've already been infected by his blood once, he has some kind of eternal connection to you. Of course, the way that this is ultimately resolved is by killing him at the end of the story. Giselle dies. Spoiler to Bleach Thousand Year Door, by the way. Giselle dies. 1,000 Year War. Did I say 1,000 Year Door? I'm thinking Paper Mario here. 1,000 Year War. Spoiler, Giselle dies. Because of course someone as powerful as him, you would have to kill him off. Because once again, like, his mind control is basically a permanent effect. Which is super broken if you think about it. But another thing too is that and this is what actually made me like Giselle as a villain, is how little he actually has to do anything. Because of course, like, most of the setup of the story is that Giselle has been plotting this for a long time. And so all you see in 1,000 Year Blood War, the bulk of what you see, especially in the anime, because of course you have to like cut material for time efficiency purposes, but Giselle's been planning this for a long time, and so all the attacks that he does, they're just like the end result of an escalation of events. With that said, though, I think where the controversy comes in, like, how do you gender Giselle? See, the one thing that's kind of just, you just gotta deal with it. I know, like, your typical feminist would rage and freak out about it, but the fact of the matter is, like, Japan is depicting like an evil man doing evil man things, which is ironic because why would you then want to change? Why would you ever want to make ambiguous Giselle's gender? Where you could simply just do a men are evil message by keeping Giselle as a man, and he's doing what evil men in his position would do. Badung-cheng! But basically, he does what any evil man would do. He just so happens to also be a cross-dresser. And of course, the cross-dressing is just like the cherry on top to like how evil he is. Because Giselle's whole thing is that he's a master manipulator. And so the cross-dressing is just an extra layer of that, figuratively and literally. Where everything Giselle does, and what makes him a genius villain, is that everything he says and does is meant to distract you. Distract you from what he's really up to and his real plan. Which is why the heroes almost mess up and almost fall into his plan at the end of the 1,000 Year Blood War, because Giselle had been manipulating everybody that well. And he was just that far, he thought that far ahead. But of course, you know, plot armor saves heroes and heroes defeat them. But if you have thought about it for longer than 5 seconds, unlike the person just rages, oh, you know, effeminate man must be trans kind of thing. If you thought about it for longer than 5 seconds, you would see that, like, the entire construction of Giselle's character, from his design to like all the play-ons with like him being a man, exemplifies the evil that some men are very capable of. and the dangers of being like deceived by people like him. And so, I one thing that I just think about, where, you know, and this is the other thing too, when I was doing a little case study on Giselle, he was actually going to be part of another kind of topic I want to talk about, which is basically where we talk about like men who are effeminate, and in our modern cultural landscape, especially in the West, like in the U.S. and in Canada, and of course like Europe. But there's this whole thing where like if you have a male character who acts feminine or dresses feminine, then there's like this whole like they must be trans. And I'm in that camp where like I push back a bit against that idea, because fundamentally, if you do that, you kind of erase the point of those characters. You erase what makes them so unique and what makes them actually some of the coolest characters. So the easy example, a controversy that wasn't that long ago, not part of the case study by the way, would be like Bridget from Guilty Gear. And of course, like Bridget is like the inventor of the term trap, because he's just that girly looking that like men think he's an actual woman, and some men have tried hitting on him, which is also what happens with Giselle. But then of course, like what you find out is that the whole okay, let me backstep that a little bit. By having these men appear feminine, when these very masculine traits come out of them, both good and bad, and this is where like in my other discussion topic, which we may do in the future, hit that like and subscribe, and hit the comment or in the chat if you want to see this the original subject I was going to talk about. But when it comes to like these guys who are like effeminate on the outside, the story also completely just like turns that around and shows like these guys are like very manly men on the inside. And you have to take the good and the bad. So Giselle was the character I kind of studied to view like a bad character, because like Bridget would be a good guy character of the girly on the outside, total dude on the inside. And Giselle is also like this, and Giselle's all the bad parts of it. So Giselle is basically, you know, he's basically a rapist. In the manga, it's a lot more suggested that he is. I mean, what do you think he does with all those girls he just has manipulated under his finger? What do you think he does? Like the manga like heavily implies that's what he does. And the part that makes it really chilling is that like the women don't object. So I mean, I know before some smartass goes like, well, is it technically, you know, there is some consent, but manipulated consent is kind of a gray area. But that's kind of like the bad side of like Giselle is a man on the inside. He has those like dark characteristics that many men do have. And so if you try to erase gender in that sense from Giselle, you kind of defeat the purpose of how the character is constructed. You're missing the point, is what I'm getting at. Which I know it's funny for me to say that, like, I actually like Giselle as a villain, because the way he's thought out as a villain is actually very well done. And the fact that he comes so close to his plan and the fruition of it without needing to rely on like raw force is actually pretty genius how they did it. So that's Giselle, and of course this article I have up here. I could I should have posted the articles in the description, but honestly, you could just easily look up these on the internet. They'll like be like your earliest search results if you just look up the characters that we're talking about. And so another thing about Giselle that like is kind of interesting as well, that like if you a lot of people miss the point of Giselle's cross-dressing and how it works into his, like, how he manipulates people. So, of course, like, by dressing up as a girl, especially, like, a young girl. Because the funny thing is, too, is, like, Giselle's not, like, young either. Giselle's, like, almost my age. It's kind of funny. And then, like, which also makes the whole, like, him taking advantage of women even more creepy, because he's, like, a dude in his 30s. And the girl, and, like, for instance, like, Charlotte is, like, basically, like, 18. So, it's like, yeah, that's super shifty. But, that just shows you how powerful Giselle is, that he can just manipulate her the way he does. And then the part that makes it, even freakier, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, where Giselle's like a realistic villain in that sense. Like, you could think of, like, real life cases where you have probably older guys who take advantage of all these young women. Especially when you have a lot of young women, they're looking to, like, start careers in places, and, you know, the horrible, like, stereotype of, like, you know, couch interviews and stuff like that. Which, funnily enough, that's actually the origin of the Me Too movement. Was that the Me Too movement was all about calling out, like, the entertainment industry primarily. Or, like, like, not just entertainment, but entertainment was super guilty, but, like, other professional industries, that they took advantage of young female applicants, do a couch interview to get them the job, because women generally don't have power in those spaces. And so these guys could be like, well, I could get you a job if you, do something for me. And so, like, you know, basically, and then the boys took that way too far. But it's a real thing. And unfortunately, it's a real thing. And it still happens, despite all the Me Too stuff as well. Even though, yeah, they're trying to keep, like, the professional world more accountable, there will always be people like Giselle that are able to just manipulate, especially women, in that way. And Giselle, as, like, an anime character, just kind of amplifies that idea. And the cross-dressing adds on to that, because, once again, it's the whole deception thing. And the cross-dressing is just a cherry on top to the idea that Giselle is a master of deception. Well, minus the whole Eureka of semen thing. But, which is, I mean, take that as you will. And that's all part of the other things too, the whole, like, you know, Giselle's kind of very rapey. But I still think, like, one thing that, when people, like, think about, if you were to think about this character, and then think about, like, what is the point of the character? And this is also, like, fiction doing very well, addressing real world problems through storytelling. Is that the fact of the matter is, there are people just like Giselle in real life. May not necessarily be cross-dressing, but they are masters of deceiving people into getting what they want. And especially women. And this is all the more reason that, like, you know, we have to fight to protect women in women's spaces. Which is another reason why, you know, the whole, like, transgender controversy is a thing. Is because what many people have come to realize is that it's just more invasion of, like, women's spaces. And maybe because I like women too much or something, but I'm all for protecting women's spaces, to give women spaces. And with that said, you have to be all the more careful of people like Giselle. And they do show up in real life. Every single, like, politician, for the most part, is a Giselle. Especially Democrat ones in the States. Trudeau! In Canada. But the idea of these master manipulators that could just deceive women and invade their spaces. And Giselle was a very interesting way that anime tackled. I remember the original story was actually like 5 years ago, I think. I think the original story is like 5 years or 6 years ago in the manga. Could be even older. And then of course the anime just did the adaptation now, because you know how anime be like that. But I mean, to be fair, Bleach is like a super like long ass series. So hey Gauntlets, welcome to the stream. So that's our first case study with Giselle from Bleach, 1,000-Year War. Maybe we can come back to him because he is very interesting and he is the current hot topic. I appreciate the Bleach podcast. It was funny because we just finished our Bleach section of our study. The second case study I want to talk about, which is crazy to think how long I've been on the internet doing this. I'm revisiting a topic I covered almost a year ago. What's my favorite Bleach opening? That's a tough one. I have to say the third season. The third season was like... Okay, so... This is just me being weird, I guess, but... What made the third season's opening work was that how different it was from the first two. Because the first two are your typical, oh yeah, you know, the typical way you want to open an action anime. Awesome ass, heavy music. You're watching the intro, being told that something awesome is about to happen. That's how the first two seasons go. That's how most action animes do it. But the third season takes a very different swing. It's not an upbeat opening. It's a lot more solemn and melancholy in it. And I really liked it because it was so different from the other ones. And then of course we get to the fourth season and it goes back to the rock music style. But the third one was a very total tone shift, and for some reason that one I just remember a lot more. Like I couldn't tell you much about the other like openings other than they had like more rock and metal elements to them. Whereas like the third one, it was very different, and I remember it a bit better. Okay, so that's the Giselle study. We're gonna move on to the next study where I revisited Peter Dinklage and the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs remake. I mean, once again, the original controversy that I will be talking about is about a year old. More, if not more than that. Your favorite opening is 13 Ranbu. Okay. That's the... What season is that one? That's a... See, it must have been one of the seasons I missed. Because I don't think I remember that one. But anyway, the Peter Dinklage and the Snow White Seven Dwarfs thing. Now I know the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has picked up new controversy because of the whole thing with like the actress being kind of a bee. And basically the whole problem of like Western media and basically insulting your audience just because they don't get with your program. Which is never what you should never do that. You should never insult the fans, if you will. That's just a fast track to like everybody's gonna boycott your product because no one wants to do things if you insult them. But anyway, this is an older controversy, and it was the Peter Dinklage criticizing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs' story and how like old-fashioned it was because of like the dwarves being depicted as like these grungy, dirty like guys instead of like, you know, men aren't like dirty and filthy, and men don't have to be like such slobs. But the funny thing is, and I went in a lot more detail in my previous podcast about this same article, is that That's the point. The point of the dwarves being like such slobs is that they don't care about anything else. All they care about is hi ho, is off to work we go. That's their whole shtick. The dwarves have lived their lives in a mine. All they care about is getting diamonds and whatnot. All they care about is work. The point of the story is that it's a boy meets girl story without the sexual tension. And so Snow White shows up and she changes them. She changes the men in the story. And then, of course, the climax, especially in the Disney version, the climax is after the evil queen poisons Snow White, the dwarves are straight out like out for blood. They're ready to like murder that bitch, right? Because of the evil queen, to their knowledge, killing Snow White. For all they knew, she was dead. So they wanted blood. They were out for revenge. And the contrast is, if they had never met Snow White, they would never have acted like, well, because they would never have acted like that. The value of life was not the same to them without Snow White. That's the point of the story. And so for the dwarves to be a bunch of slobs in the beginning of the story, that's the point. The point is that they're apathetic men. And if you ever, like, and here's a funny thing too, it's like, oh, you know, like, men, like, this is the 21st century, people aren't like that. It's like, have you ever met an apathetic man in the year 2023? They are just as bad, if not worse. That's the whole, like, the internet criticizing the incel community. That's what that is. That's what the dwarves are. That's the point. And so, when Peter Dinklage made this criticism, and of course, like, I remember when I saw the original Facebook post, like, over a year ago, the whole joke was that, like, man, I bet Peter Dinklage has never been in, like, a boys' dorm. Because boys' dorms are pretty nasty. But, here's a little secret. And sorry, ladies, I'm letting out all your secrets here. But, women's dorms are way, way worse. Like, let me rephrase. Okay, the reason why guys' dorms are gross is because, like, guys may not sweep as often. Sometimes guys, you know, they don't throw out that pizza box that they should have thrown out right after they finished eating the pizza. They should have thrown the box out right away. Now the room starts to smell like the box of pizza. Okay, that's kind of gross. But girls are way worse. Girls are way worse when it comes to, like, being, like, how messy and dirty their rooms can be. First of all, like, living with one woman and her goo hoarding is pretty bad. Now, you put, like, 10 girls together and they're goo hoarding, and oh my god, it's you're asking for nightmares at that point. Also, girls are way less chalant about, like, leaving their bras out and stuff like that. Like, I've once walked into a girl's dorm where they straight up built a Christmas tree out of their bras. like what the actual crap? Yeah, women can be pretty disgusting like that. And there are other things that I could talk about that women do. That guys totally don't do this. And we know that guys don't do this. But I would probably get canceled off the internet, so I'm not going to say it. But women, you know you do this. You know what I'm talking about. And you know that I know you do this. So don't even pretend to deny it. Anyway, back to Peter Dinklage and his whole criticism of, like, oh, it's so old-fashioned. But it's like, one of the things about stories and fairy tales especially was that, and I use this with, like, Giselle a little bit as well, where fiction, and we use stories in fiction to reflect real life. Sure, the point of like a big part of fiction is that they have to be exaggerated. That's what makes them fun to watch and to read, is that they are exaggerated. But in reality, there is a, like, life imitating art or art imitating life element you know, and it's that whole thing, right? Is it life imitating art or art imitating life paradox? Chicken or the egg, but more sophisticated. And when it comes to like the way the dwarves act and behave pre Snow White, it's like, yeah, that's how guys act. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised your typical prog didn't accept the original story, because the whole thing with like, you could make a whole case about like capitalism bad with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because the dwarves are very apathetic because all they care about is work. They don't care about like hygiene or, you know, home care or anything like that. All they care about is working in the diamond mines. But Snow White changes that. The point of the story is that people can, like, men and women need each other to change. That's the point of the story. The men needed her to change. And so that's why the place, their cottage is like, you know, a pigsty. Because they had no reason, there was no motivation for them to improve their lives. It's 2023's incel case. That's what this is. That's the point. The point is that people need each other to change. That was the point of Snow White back then. I don't know what the new movie's gonna do, but you know, we already know it's bad, because the actress came out and said like, oh, we're changing the story so that it's like it's more modern and realistic, quote unquote realistic. I mean, you're talking about a fairy tale with a bunch of dwarves. How realistic is that? But similar to the whole Giselle thing, there was already like a reflection to real life that people could latch onto, which is what made the classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs a memorable story that Walt Disney was like, yes, I must make an adaptation of that. That's gonna be my first major project after I invented like Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney was like, yeah, I'm doing that story. Because Walt Disney, like back then, he knew. He knew that was like the quintessential boy meets girl story without him needing to use sexual content, which is perfect when you're trying to make an industry to appeal to children. You want the boy meets girl story minus the sexual tension. That works perfectly for children. And Walt Disney knew that. See, that's what makes Walt Disney was a genius. That's why people thought he was a genius, because he. But then, like, when I look at it now, it's like, I guess everyone else is just so stupid. But then, of course, is it any different? Is it any more different today? Walt Disney's genius was that he, compared to his contemporaries, Walt Disney, he got the point. And so he used that and then marketed it to make money. And it worked. Because Walt Disney got the point. But you see these like modern, you see these people nowadays and they make their criticisms about like old stories. And then you quickly see that they did not get the point. They don't get the point of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Clearly. With Peter Dinklage and his criticism a year ago, and now the current controversy with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and how it needed to be changed for a modern audience. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's already modern. But the idea is not like... See, this is the problem, the sidetracking a little bit, but this is kind of an overarching thing when it comes to like any of these kind of case studies, when you see like controversies in old stories. The point of the stories is that the stories are meant to be timeless. They can be translated to any time period. And if you do a really good job, it can go beyond culture. So, using the boy meets girl example, and yes, I used this same illustration last year as well, so repeat of that stream, but you should still watch it. I think it's number 16 or something. Yeah, I don't do podcasts all that often. I think it was like number 16 or something. And I did it last year. And it was basically like... Okay, My Dress Up Darling is the same story as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Boy meets girl. Realizes there's more to their life than what they have. Stop being so self-defeating and aspire to live your life for someone else. That's every boy meets girl story. and the reason why we keep telling that story is because that's just part of what brings a fulfilling life. How do you have a man have a fulfilling life? You give him a woman to fight for. Hell, even the Bible does this to some extent, right? That's why the Bible uses that weird ass language of like Christ as the husband and the church as the bride language in the New Testament, which I know a lot of people get weirded out by that. But the reason for that is because it's trying to tickle the back of men's minds, because of course there's the other thing with like a major objective of the Bible was that it was trying to make a world of good men. So how do you make a world of good men? Well, you give them a good male role model, ultimately the person of Jesus Christ. And so what the Bible does is it paints this illustration of like Jesus as the man who fights for his bride. And of course the Bible uses like, well, we are all technically the bride of Christ because he fights for all of us in the same way, because I guess, see, the difference is Jesus being God, he has the infinite ability to fight for everybody, but real men like you and me can't do that. I can't fight for every single person in my life, let alone every single person in my city, let alone every single person in the world. I don't have that power. But I can fight for one woman. That should be doable. And that's the quintessential idea that's poked at with every single boy meets girl story. The man finds the woman that he's willing to do that for. He's willing to fight for her. And so, in My Dress Up Darling, there's a perfect chemistry between Gojo and Kitagawa. That he fights for her. He's the one who wants to see her dreams become a reality. But what, in the manga anyway, because the TV series is not that far yet, but the manga is like super slow anyway, so a second season won't be for a while. I really want it though. Just Chitose needs to show up on screen. But anyway, Kitagawa's whole response, and this is the female hero story, is that she's the emotional rock. She's the one that reminds a man that you are already someone of worth. You don't have to work yourself to death to have value in life. You already have that. And that's what Kitagawa is supposed to remind Gojo of as she one, falls in love with him, and two, she makes it a big deal when she compliments like his hard work at making cosplay outfits. Is that she's reminding him that you are valuable. You are someone worthy of praise. And that was something that, once again, going back to Snow and the Seven Dwarfs, that's what the dwarves don't have. Now, of course, I know the typical modern person would say, well, men can easily just comfort each other. And like a man can tell another man, you are someone of value. And that is true. You can do that. But in the boy meets girl story, there's a certain layer to that doesn't just exist when, like, you know, bros going like, you know, bros before, you know, something else. Not finishing that sentence. But, you know, there's a different layer, there's a different dimension to it when it's men and women interacting with each other. And that's the boy meets girl story. And Snow and the Seven Dwarfs does this in a non-sexual way, which was actually what made it clever for a story. Especially the Disney version really nailed in on that part of it. Because once again, like if you go to the other Disney fairy tale stories, there's obviously the sexual tension, but they had to like tone it down for a younger audience. But Snow White, that wasn't necessary because the Snow White story already was able to pull that off. But every guy needs those like women in their lives to know that there's something to fight for. And that's the point of the dwarves being slobs. They didn't have that in their lives. So they had no reason to make their lives better. They had no reason to be clean. They're basically a who gives a shit attitude. And before Snow White came up and came into their lives, that was how they thought. And that's how most men think before they have like that person in their life. That's how most guys think. They don't care. That's human nature. But that's where the love story comes in. That's why love stories are so important, and especially ones like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They remind us that when we actually have love in our lives, we stop being so apathetic. And that's an important thing you have to go through in life, is that you have to stop being apathetic. Because it's easy to be apathetic when you're young. But as you get older, you have to find meaning. And apathy is not where you get it. So that's the thing where, like, the whole Peter Dinklage thing was really stupid. Was because how could you not see the point of that? How do you not see that, like, people need each other? And yeah, the other argument that could be made is like, well, the Seven Dwarfs already are 7 of them. They just need each other. Which you could make that argument, but I mean, then you run into the stagnation problem. You can't just have the same people around you. Part of life is to go out there, have your adventure, meet new people. And I told this whole bit with, like, my anime revolution story. Is that, like, even in the most stupid of things, like an anime convention. Not that anime conventions are stupid, but you get my point. Even in, like, the silliest trivial of things, like anime conventions, we all need to expand, like, the people we know. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be, like, deeply intimate with every single person you encounter. But you also can't be, like, stagnant and only have, like, a select few in your life. You have to constantly be out there looking for adventure, which I know is tough because, you know, everybody's an introvert apparently. So it's hard to go out there, and yeah, that's true. But great things don't come for free. And your development as a human being and growth, your emotional growth, doesn't come for free. It's gonna be there's a cost to it. There's a risk to it. But if you want to grow as a person, you have to take it. And hey, who knows? Who knows what you'll find? Maybe for some of you guys, and this is the incel problem too. I'll give you guys some life advice. A lot of you young single guys out there, you know, I know the dating market sucks, but you don't know who you're gonna find when you go out there. And be real about it. You might find someone that's in the same boat as you. And you can fight through those kind of struggles together as you face this big world. Because even though, yes, you can fit the world in the palm of your hand, you're just one guy in it. So the world will always be a big place. But you don't have to feel trapped in it. Go out there, have your adventure. You never know who or what you'll find. Also, like, how much sense does it, like, this has nothing to do with the subject matter, but, like, how stupid is it to, like, try and take a story from, like, hundreds of years ago and then say, like, it should be how it is in, like, 2023. That's not how things work. Things exist within, like, a time period. Chronology of things do matter. The sequence of events do matter. Anyway, finally our third case study will be Octopath Traveler and this dumbass article that I came upon. It's called "We Need to Talk About the Sexist Garbage in Octopath Traveler. Retro games don't need retro values." You can already know this is off to a hot start. So, this person had, like, when someone says something like this is how you know that their analysis, one, these people are really disingenuous with what their opinion is, and second, their analysis of the story itself is just dog shit. Strong language, sorry, but that's what it is. These guys have no idea how to analyze a story. So, I won't go through the whole article. God, I won't subject you to that. I serve a merciful God, and so I will give you mercy. I will not subjugate you to that. So the TLDR of this dumb article is that in the beginning of the Primrose story, so Octopath Traveler 1 had 8 characters, hence Octo. And the idea of Octopath Traveler is that you explore 8 stories of these characters. And one of the characters, her name is Primrose, and she's the dancer character. And her story is that she works as a dancer in a pretty shifty town in the desert land. So that already tells you enough, right? And she works with a bunch of sisters for a master. Yeah, that's what we'll go with. And basically, she's the master of this place. He has connections to this guy, and the guy has like this mark on his hand of the Black Crow. And Primrose remembers that mark because her father was murdered by these guys who like were called the what were they actually called? It's been a while since I played Octopath Traveler, but basically it's like a crow cult kind of thing. And Primrose decides like she's gonna ditch this whole like being a dancer thing and finally chase after these guys so she can have revenge for the death of her father. Anyway, that's not gonna be simple because of course, you know, I guess we're gonna drop the pretenses. She's basically a brothel girl for a pimp. That's what she is. And so she's gotta leave this pimp. But that ain't easy. So she tries to sneak out and she gets help from one of the other brothel girls. But of course, later she gets caught by said pimp. And throughout the story, he says some pretty derogatory stuff. One of the lines that's quoted in this article is the whole like, instead of talking back to me, you should know where to put your mouth. Yeah. Do I even need to spell that out? And so this dumbass article here goes on about how like, oh, you know, like it's so derogatory, it treats women like garbage, whatever. This like blatant use of misogyny. I'm like, yes, that's the point. He's evil. He's a pimp. Have you ever? Okay, real question. To anyone who's written anything like this or made this kind of complaint about like misogyny in like media, especially when it's in regard to like a pimp being misogynistic, have you ever met a pimp in real life who was nice to women? I'll wait. But not too long, because I plan to finish this video. I plan to do other stuff with my life. So, but like, how stupid can you be? So when the story uses like this kind of language, and yeah, like at the time it's like shock. Part of it, like from a narrative standpoint, there's like shock value when you're like watching it or you're playing the game. There's a bit of that shock value. That's true. But like, how else would you write this scenario? How else would you write a girl stuck in a brothel trying to escape her pimp? How else would you write that? How else would you write a pimp? It's like, you know, I gotta be a pastor for a moment here, but that's one of the things that like people make stupid complaints about like certain parts of the Bible, where yes, the Bible has certain guys who act like pimps. Yes, of course they're bad people. Of course bad things happen in the Bible. Pimps existed in the Bible like they do in real life. How do you think pimps act? They're derogatory and like abusive to women. That's what they do. That's why people. That's why being a pimp depicted as an evil thing. Yes, of course. That's the point. And then, of course, from a gameplay standpoint, in Primrose's case, yes, he is a bad guy. We're revving up the fight battle. We're gonna fight a bad guy. We're gonna kill a bad guy. Isn't that supposed to be a good thing? That's the whole point of Primrose's story, is that she's out to go kill bad guys. You can't, like, What, you wanted him to be a sympathetic, oh wait, he's actually a good guy despite the fact he beats women. You shouldn't kill him. No, he's evil. To the blade with you. Right? And of course, like, if you actually played the game, Primrose is like, she's super like classy about it, where she's like, well, I guess you were a pretty good dancer after all. After she like does like the final blow. It's great. But like, when you go back to the articles like this, and they're like, oh, you know, like, you try to make retro games, you shouldn't have like, you shouldn't write people in ways that they would have acted in ancient times. It's like, no, that's dumb. That doesn't make any sense. That's like trying to go into like William Shakespeare and then like the way he uses like male and female words and say like, Shakespeare, you can't talk like that. You have to be more inclusive language. Like, nobody talked like that in ancient England. Well, ancient England. Actually pretty modern, pre-Renaissance England. No one talked like that. Like, that's how people talked back then. And then of course like the whole like, yes, the villain is a pimp. These guys are bad. These guys are abusive to women. Yes, they're bad people. That's the point. You have to let bad people be bad people in stories. And this is where like, on a side note, this is like one of the modern problems. This is one of the problems of modern writing. And this is especially bad when it comes to like the Mary Sue morality. The quintessential modern example of the Mary Sue morality is Star Wars, the newer sequel, episode 7, 8, and 9, and how like they tried to redeem Kylo Ren's character, but it's like he's a genocidal murderer. But it's okay, he's in love with Rey, right? It's totally fine. So what if he did all these bad things? It's actually not that bad, really, because it was just to bring him closer to his destiny of meeting, Rey. Like, that's so messed up. And in real life, like, that's just plain creepy. If people actually base their morality on like just another person like that, another fallible person. Now I know someone's gonna be a smart to be like, well, Christians do that with Jesus, but the way that like, oh my gosh, like with Star Wars, it was super bad. And like Kylo Ren and his like Mary Sue morality, it's like it's all about Rey, so his actions are actually justified. It's like, no, he's a bad guy. And so in a lot of and then of course like that's like, okay, Loki's a little bit more complex, so he's not a good example to use. I'm trying to think of like other examples of like, well, think of like a lot of like these modern reboots of like old like Disney properties, like the Maleficent movie, the Cruella movie. Is that like they downplay the idea of evil? Okay, the Maleficent movie's a little different. That one took in a very interesting approach, and that one is more sympathetic. Whereas like the Cruella movie's just flat out bad, where like they tried to justify puppy murder. Now say that out loud with me. The Cruella movie went out of its way to justify puppy murder. Yeah, in what world is that like? How are you gonna try and make a sympathetic villain out of a person who wants to commit puppy murder? I don't get that. Like, in stories, you need characters to be evil for the sake of being evil. And so, like, Giselle's like that too. Giselle's like, he's evil for the sake of being evil. And it works. Because you need characters like that in your story to make it work. In the Primrose story, it's like, yes, the guy's evil. He abuses women. That's evil enough. And so, I don't know why like people made a big deal out of it. And then like you read dumb articles like this, where this is like from 5 years ago, when Octopath first came out. I know it's an old story, but it's it just shows how stupid people can be. Where it's like, yeah, women that are thrown in brothels are not treated nicely. Why do you think there's like a whole like activism to end like to decriminalize sex work? It's because like it's not the women's fault that they're thrown into such crappy life scenarios. It's evil men who have abducted women basically, mistreat them, do all kinds of awful things, and then force them into sex work. That's awful. It is awful. And we should just say it's awful. So why then is it when you depict in video games, you're like, oh, it's so misogynistic? It's like, yes, because that's how it is. That's how it is in the real world. There are evil people like that, and there needs to be action taken against them. That's the point. And the point is, like, when Primrose, in that Primrose story, where she fights, you know, the pimp character, it's like, yes, you are supposed to be on Primrose's side. You're supposed to have that vindictive feeling that she does, which is actually good storytelling. This is why actually Octopath Traveler is a great game, by the way. Is that they actually invoke those feelings very well. That you feel what the characters feel in their stories, and you feel what Primrose feels, and like, I'm gonna have my revenge. This is it. Your day has come. And you're like, yes, let's get his ass. And so that's good storytelling. And so you don't downplay it with this kind of like unrealistic, nonsensical idea that like, oh, the world should be like, you should write things to be more modern. It's like, no. In the wise words of Neil Gaiman, you don't write things to be relevant. You write things to be inspiring. And that's something that a lot of these people just don't get. Because the point of any story, at the end of the day, is to inspire people. Now, how you inspire them, well, that's, you know, every writer has their own way of, one, inspiring them, and two, what do you want to inspire? How do you want to inspire them? And so, the Primrose story, it was a really dumb controversy back then, but this is not a thing that's like unique to Octopath Traveler. This comes up from time to time where it's like, you write villains in a story and then you try to like downplay how evil they are by like making them very politically correct. It's like, to the same people who advocate for like we must be politically correct, isn't not being politically correct evil? So if you want to depict an evil character, you would do anything to make them not politically correct, right? So clearly, like, the people who come up with these things, that's how you can tell they don't think. Because the obvious route would be, well, you would just leave the story the way it is, because it serves your purpose as well. But too many people just don't get the point. And that's the big reason why we have a stupid society, is because people just don't get the point when you put any story in front of them. It doesn't matter what the story is. Most people just don't get the point. I'm done the 3 case study thing, but we'll kind of do like a bonus mini case study. It's the whole like evil Superman thing. And one, it's already being overdone in media, but also why the evil Superman is just a stupid idea. Is that the evil Superman is the concept of someone obtains godlike power and abuses it. It's that idea played straight. But if you actually know the origins of Superman's character, is like, Superman is the subversion. You're not subverting Superman with Homelander. You're not subverting subverting Superman with Omni-Man. That's not how that works. Superman is the subversion. The origins of Superman is that Superman is basically 2 Jewish guys critiquing Hitler's idea of the Übermensch. So, Adolf Hitler's idea of the Übermensch was the idea that there was a superior man. And, of course, in the real world, might makes right. So when the Übermensch arrives, he will just rule the world. And everyone else will be under the foot of the Übermensch. And then, of course, Hitler took that a step further by saying that he and the Nazi were the Übermensch. And so, Superman was created by two Jewish immigrants to critique that idea. And it's not just that, like, think about how, like, Superman is, like, well, he's a literal, like, better than humans. He has, like, superhuman powers. Even in the earliest days of Superman, where he wasn't as powerful as he is now, he's still, like, pretty powerful. He can pick up a car easily. He can jump he can jump the height of a building in a single bound. You know, Superman is he would be like a literal Übermensch, like the might makes right. But of course, the subversion is that Superman goes out of his way to protect those who cannot protect themselves. So the funniest thing, if you actually read Action Comic number 1, his first 3 heroic acts all involve breaking and entering, which is kind of funny. The first one is where he breaks into a judge's house. And he goes up to this judge. He's like at home chilling in his own house. Superman just breaks into his house and he's just like, "Hey, you, there's a woman on death row. I have evidence of her innocence. You have to help her. You have to save her. Here's the evidence. You've got to make all the calls needed. We have to stop her from like being executed because she's innocent." So that's the first one. And then the funny part is like this woman is just some random ass woman that like never appeared before, well, because it's the beginning of the comic, and second, never appears again, because she's like just some person. The second feat of Superman is that he breaks into another person's house to stop a man from beating his wife, and Superman he stops him. And the third one is he breaks into a store. He breaks into I think it's like a warehouse or something. He breaks into a warehouse because there's a guy who's working an overnight shift and he almost gets himself killed because of work stress. You know, people know what I'm talking about. You're one of those people who has to work overnight at a crappy warehouse job. It's kind of dangerous. Actually, it's really dangerous. Even with our modern technology, it's still dangerous. And this guy almost gets himself killed by not working safely. Because it's hard to work safely when you're doing overnight shift by yourself. That's understandable. And Superman breaks into this place to save this guy's life. Superman's whole thing is that he's the idea that the Übermensch does exist, but the Übermensch isn't someone who as Hitler would have thought ruled everyone underneath their heel because might makes right. Instead, the idea of Superman is the Übermensch does exist. He protects the innocent and will go out of his way to protect them from people like Hitler. That's the idea of Superman. And of course, from that you get the whole propaganda side of it of Superman fighting World War II and everything. And those comics, yes, they were a thing. The idea was that the point of Superman is that he's the guy that cares. And so that's a subversion to the might makes right mentality of if you have power, you should rule everyone else. Which was that was the Nazi idea. Which apparently Canada gave an applaud to that ideology, which was crazy. Applauding people who want to subjugate others. I thought and what makes that even more messed up? That the Canadian government actually applauded basically a Nazi promoting the might makes right. Tomorrow is Reconciliation Day. Reconciliation Day, for those of you who don't know, is a Canadian day where we celebrate and always strive forward toward making relations with the indigenous people who have been hurt badly by colonialism. Those are two incompatible things. You can't praise a Nazi for might makes right and then also have Reconciliation Day. You know that, right? Does the Canadian government not know that? You can't have both those things. Because the whole point of Reconciliation Day is that bad things happen because people lived with the whole might makes right. And indigenous people were hurt. Yes, true. And that's why, like, we want to make things better. And the whole point of Superman's character is you can choose to be kind. And if the Ubermensch does exist, you don't use that power to hurt others. You're supposed to be a good person to help people. Captain America was just Marvel's version on that take. If you were to be the superior man, you have to use your power to be good to others. And then of course Spider-Man made the iconic phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. But see, the problem is when people make like the whole evil Superman thing is that you miss the point. The point is that if you have power, you don't get a right to just abuse others. That makes you a bad guy. That's what will lead to the end of the world, which is basically, you know, the boys, right? But the whole thing, the reason why the boys is stupid is like, yes, that's the idea of the Ubermensch played straight. It's not a subversion to Superman as people might claim it is. Homelander is the idea played straight. Superman is the subversion to the Ubermensch walking over everyone like the Nazis dreamed it would happen. But also, you know, hot take of the week. I mean, I've already had a number of hot takes already. But the major hot take of the week is, of course, with the forsaking of God in our society. And I use the word God loosely. But by forsaking God, we have now started to re-embrace the idea of might makes right. And that's why you have like power politics, cultural colonization. Giselle is a case of cultural colonization, by the way. And we could go into that later if you want clarification on that. But why you get like power politics, cultural colonization and stuff like that, is because people have just went back. Instead of striving to be good, people would rather just go might makes right. And then bludgeon everyone else until they're on top. But at the end of the day, that is what causes, you know, wars and why people feel the need to resort to violence. It's because those who are bludgeoning everyone else below them, claiming themselves to be the arbiters of morality or whatever, they're the ones who will inevitably bring, you know, the oppression that they claim to not want. They will bring it upon themselves because they go around bludgeoning others, putting them beneath them, and eventually the tables will turn. We've seen that play out so many times. That's why people understood that you can't just think might makes right, because eventually, when a new mighty person comes along and dethrones you, well, you're later gonna be at the bottom, and you're gonna be the oppressed, and you just have to be okay with it. But maybe, just maybe, we can try and move beyond those ideas, and people can see why we need goodness in our everyday lives, and to get the point of why we tell these like stories to each other, that we need goodness to fight real evil. We need goodness to fight manipulative men like Giselle, or like the pimp in Octopath Traveler. We need good women to remind men that they have more to live for, like in Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. We need good men to protect those women from evil queens who would try to usurp them because they feel threatened that their might doesn't make right. We need women to remind men that there's more to life than what you have now. We need each other for that reason. That's why we tell these stories. To remind ourselves how much we need each other to fight evil together. Because at the end of the day, you know, that's what the human race. That's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the human race, facing this cruel world together. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So why don't we act like it? Anyway, so that is the end of my discourse today, and my 3 little case studies. Well, 4 case studies, 3.5 case studies. The Superman was kind of a spur of the moment one, but let me put this image back up. No. There you go. Anyway, that's all I gotta say for that. Just a short podcast on 3 case studies of various controversies and the fundamental problem of people not getting the point. Because when you don't get the point, then you can be easily led astray and think all kinds of stupid things, and then you get in trouble because of it. But that's why it's important to really dissect stories, dissect any information. Stories is just an easy example, but to dissect any information and really glean and think about, well, what is the point? Because it is in that search that you will grow as a person. And that's something we all gotta do. You can't be a kid forever. Anyway, that's gonna be the end. If you guys have any questions or things like that, or other little topics we can talk about for a little bit. It's only 4:30. I'll spare a few minutes. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and shoot them. I'm gonna eat the rest of this. It's probably all cold now, though. I need a better way to maintain moisture in this. I need bakers in the chat. I could use your help on how to make basically sweet bread and have it maintain its moisture longer. It was moist on the first day I made it, but one day later it's all hard now. So if you guys got pointers, I'd love to hear them. In the meantime, yeah, probably get in the stream soon if there's no questions. I'm just gonna keep eating this for a bit longer. Alright, just do a bit of housekeeping. This is your last chance for questions. A little bit of housekeeping. So next week, we'll have a pretty regular schedule. Monday and Wednesday at 2 o'clock Pacific time, we'll continue our Heroes of Might and Magic 3 playthrough. So that'll be from 2 2 o'clock Pacific time to 6 on Monday and Wednesday. And the next Friday we'll do another Streaming Parson Podcast around 3 o'clock Pacific time. So next week's gonna be a pretty regular week. Just continue making more content for you guys. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today. With that said, I hope you guys have a great Friday night. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And I'll see you guys in October. Until then, God bless you.